Maybe to remind each other that it's still worth fixing. That night, long after he and Noah had gone to sleep, she sat by the window, staring at the sky. Lightning still glimmered far off over the hills. The kind that came after storms, the kind that didn't destroy, but reminded the world what light could do to darkness. The next morning, everything changed. A rider approached the ranch, mud-splattered, jaw-tight, eyes sharp with judgment. It was Caleb Ward, Silas's late wife's brother, the same man who'd once helped bury her and who'd sworn Silas should never remarry. He dismounted without greeting, his boots grinding into the mud. "So it's true," he said coldly. "You brought in a woman like this?" His eyes raked over Mara, his mouth curling. A mail-order giant. Silas's voice was calm, but his hand flexed at his side. "Watch your words, Caleb," Caleb sneered. "You think this looks right? My sister's been gone 3 years and you replace her with—" "That's enough," Silas snapped, stepping forward. But Mara placed a hand on his arm, her touch firm. She looked Caleb dead in the eye. "I don't replace ghosts, Mr. Ward. I make homes where men forgot how to live." He blinked, taken aback. She continued, voice steady. "Your sister's memory deserves peace. So does your nephew. And so does this man who hasn't known rest since the war." Caleb looked between them, jaw tight. "You'll regret this," he muttered before turning on his heel. When he was gone, Silas turned to her. "You didn't have to stand up to him." She met his gaze. "Yes, I did," he exhaled, shaking his head slowly. "You're gonna get us both in trouble. Then I hope it's the kind worth having." He laughed then, a sound that startled them both. That night, the fire burned low. Noah slept upstairs, the house quiet except for the crackle of wood and the distant howl of coyotes. Silas sat in his chair, staring into the flames. Mara sat across from him, mending one of Noah's shirts. He broke the silence first. "When I first read your letter, I thought maybe God was mocking me." She looked up. "Why?" "Because I didn't think I deserved company anymore. Not after the things I've seen, the things I couldn't stop." She set the needle down. "You blame yourself for her death?" He hesitated. "The doctor said it was the birth, but I should have seen the signs. I should have been home, not out branding cattle." She rose slowly, crossed the room, and knelt beside his chair. "You can't fight death, Silas. You can only fight the emptiness it leaves behind." His eyes found hers. "And you? What are you fighting?" "My past," she whispered, "and the voices that said no man could ever look at me with kindness." He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then they were blind, her breath caught. For a long, trembling moment they stayed like that. His hand on her cheek, her heart beating wild. But instead of kissing her, he said quietly, "Not tonight. Not until I know you're here because you want to be, not because you've got nowhere else to go." She smiled through tears. "Then I guess you'll just have to wait and find out." Outside, the wind rose again, whispering across the plains like a promise. Inside, 2 hearts beat steady in the dark, one learning to trust again, the other daring to hope. Because love, out here in the wild, didn't come with vows or roses. It came with storms and silence, and the courage to face both together. The morning started quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes before trouble. The wind had stilled, and even the horses stood uneasy in their pens, ears twitching toward the road. Mara felt it before she saw it, something shifting in the air. She was hanging laundry when the first sound reached her, hoofbeats slow and deliberate, like judgment riding toward them. She turned. Dust rose on the horizon. A small group of men rode closer, 5, maybe 6. At their head was Caleb Ward, his black coat sharp against the sun, and beside him the town pastor, Reverend Coyle. Mara's stomach tightened. Inside the house, Silas stepped out onto the porch, hand resting on the railing. Noah appeared from the window, his face pale. Caleb dismounted first, boots hitting the ground with authority. "Morning, Danner," he said, voice clipped. "We need to talk." Silas didn't move. "Then talk." Caleb glanced toward Mara, who stood tall at the fence, a clothesline flapping behind her like a banner of defiance. "You've brought scandal to this land," Caleb said, turning back to Silas. "A woman like her, living here without a marriage license." The town won't stand for it. Reverend Coyle cleared his throat. Brother Silas, people are talking. A God-fearing home must have order. Mara spoke before Silas could. Order? You think gossip is order? Her voice cut through the still air. If your God measures worth by whispers, then maybe you're worshipping the wrong man. Caleb's eyes narrowed. You've got a mouth on you, woman. Maybe that's why you couldn't find a husband back east. The men chuckled under their breath, cruel and quiet. Silas's face hardened. He stepped down from the porch, boots sinking into the dust. You come here to insult her, or to take my son like you threatened before? Caleb smirked. Both. Silas's jaw tightened, but Mara stepped between them. She stood almost as tall as Caleb, her presence alone enough to make him shift back half a step. You'll have to go through me first, she said softly. Reverend Coyle raised his hand. No one wants violence. We're here to ensure the boy is raised proper, and that this arrangement doesn't lead him astray. Lead him astray. Silas's voice trembled with restrained fury. Mara's done more for this boy in 2 months than anyone since his mother died. He smiles again. He reads again. And for the first time, he sleeps through the night. You call that astray? The pastor hesitated. Caleb didn't. You're blind, Silas. This woman's using you. The whole town sees it. A mail-order bride? You think that's love? She's here for your land, your name, your money. Before he could finish, Mara spoke, her voice trembling but clear. I had no money when I came here. I had no name worth saving. And as for love, she looked at Silas, her eyes glistening. I didn't believe in it anymore until he looked at me like I wasn't something to be pitied. Her words hung in the air. Even the horses stopped fidgeting. Silas stepped forward. You've said enough, Caleb. This ranch is my home. What happens here is between me, my son, and the woman who saved both our lives, Caleb sneered. You'd throw away your reputation for her. Silas's voice rose, not in anger but in conviction. Reputation never kept me warm at night. Reputation never raised my boy or healed what the war broke. This woman did. The men behind Caleb shifted uneasily. One muttered, maybe we should head back, Caleb. But Caleb wasn't ready to lose. He turned toward Noah, who had stepped out onto the porch. Son, he called, you remember your mother, don't you? She'd want you with your real family. Noah froze, his small hands gripping the railing. His lips parted, but no sound came. The boy hadn't spoken in years. Mara knelt down on one knee, her voice gentle as the wind. Noah, she said softly, you don't have to talk. Just stay where your heart feels safe. Something inside the boy shifted. His hands trembled, his lips moved, and for the first time in so long a small, shaky word came out. Home! The sound was quiet, fragile, but it cracked through the air like thunder. Everyone went still. Caleb blinked. What did he say? Silas's throat tightened. He turned toward his son. Say it again, boy. Noah's eyes filled with tears. He stepped down from the porch and ran straight into Mara's arms. Home, he whispered again, louder this time. Home! Mara caught him, her eyes closing as she pressed his head to her chest. Caleb stood frozen, his argument shattering like glass. The pastor looked away, murmuring a soft prayer. Silas turned back to his brother-in-law. You heard him. This is his home, and if anyone in town thinks different, they can come to me. Caleb's face flushed red, fury twisting through his voice. You'll regret this, Silas. I already regret letting you ride this far. Silas replied coldly. Now leave. Caleb hesitated, then spat into the dust and mounted his horse. The others followed silent. As they rode off, the wind returned, carrying away the last echo of their hooves. For a moment no one spoke. Then Silas exhaled and turned to Mara. You just made us the talk of 3 counties. She smiled faintly, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. Then let them talk. Noah clung to her hand. Silas reached for the other. And in that quiet, something unspoken passed between the 3 of them, something that felt like family. That evening, the ranch glowed in the warmth of the setting sun. Silas fixed the last of the broken fence posts while Mara cooked inside. The smell of stew drifted through the air, rich and comforting. Noah sat by the fire, humming softly to himself. Silas walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. He paused at the doorway, watching her. The light from the fire caught the edges of her hair, turning it copper. Her sleeves were rolled, her hands moving with a grace that made even small things look sacred. "Thank you," he said quietly. She looked up. "For what?" "For today. For him. For everything." Her gaze softened. "You don't have to thank me for loving what you already love." He took a step closer. "I wasn't sure I could love again." Mara smiled sadly. "I wasn't sure anyone ever would." He reached out, brushing her cheek with the back of his fingers. The contact was light, trembling, full of unspoken things. "Mara," he whispered, "you asked me once if I sought a wife or your body." Her breath caught. "I remember. I didn't know how to answer then. But I do now." He drew in a slow breath. "I seek your laughter in this house, your strength beside me in the fields, your voice when the silence grows too long. I want your body, yes, but I want the soul that lives inside it even more." Her eyes filled with tears. "You have it, Silas Danner. You've had it since that night on the wagon." He leaned closer, hesitating for only a heartbeat, then kissed her, soft, reverent, slow. It wasn't the kiss of a man claiming something. It was the kiss of a man returning home. When they pulled apart, the fire crackled louder, the wind brushed through the open window, and the smell of rain hinted on the horizon. Mara rested her forehead against his. "You know they'll come again?" she whispered. "Men like Caleb never quit." "Then let them come," he said, voice steady. "They'll find us ready." Noah's laughter rang through the room, light, unguarded, pure. It broke the weight in the air, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Mara looked toward him, then back at Silas. "Maybe love doesn't fix what's broken," she murmured. "Maybe it just makes the pieces worth keeping," he smiled. "Then we'll keep everyone." Outside, thunder rolled far away, but the house stood strong. The woman the world called a giant, and the man they called broken, had built something neither of them thought possible. Peace. And yet, somewhere in that peace, the world beyond their ranch was stirring again. Caleb's pride wouldn't rest, and whispers of a coming reckoning were already traveling down the trails. But for now, under the steady hum of rain and the warmth of a fire that refused to die, love held the night like a promise. The storm came without warning. The sky that had been calm at dusk turned black by nightfall, the wind shrieking across the plains like a beast unchained. The horses kicked and screamed in their stalls. Lightning flashed over the hills, lighting the ranch like a battlefield. Silas grabbed his coat, ready to secure the barn doors, when a single rifle shot split the air. Mara froze by the stove. Noah screamed upstairs. Silas ran to the window. "Stay inside," he shouted. But she was already moving, barefoot, fearless, her long braid whipping behind her as she threw the door open and stepped into the storm. Rain lashed against her face, the air thick with the smell of mud and gunpowder. Another shot rang out, this one closer. She could barely see through the sheets of rain, but a dark figure on horseback loomed near the corral. "Caleb!" Silas's voice tore through the thunder. "You've lost your mind." Caleb dismounted, gun in hand, his face wild in the flashes of lightning. "You ruined everything, Silas. That woman turned this town against me." Mara stepped forward. "You did that yourself," she said steadily. "You came here with hate, and hate always loses." "Shut up," Caleb shouted, swinging the rifle toward her. His hands shook, but the rage in his eyes burned steady. "You don't belong here, woman. You've bewitched him." Before Silas could move, Mara stepped between him and the barrel. The rain clung to her dress, the wind whipping her hair like a banner. "If you're going to shoot," she said, voice trembling but unbroken, "then look me in the eye while you do it. Look at what you're afraid of." Caleb hesitated. The lightning illuminated her, tall, proud, unflinching. Not a monster, not a giant, a woman standing for something bigger than herself. Silas stepped beside her. "Put it down, Caleb," he said quietly. "We've both lost too much already." But Caleb's grief twisted into madness. He screamed and pulled the trigger. The gun misfired. The shot cracked harmlessly into the mud at Mara's feet, sparks flying up into the rain. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Silas lunged, tackling his brother-in-law to the ground. The rifle flew into the dark. The two men struggled, rolling through the mud, their faces flashing white under the lightning. Caleb threw wild punches, shouting, "You took my sister's place! You betrayed her memory!" Silas struck back, pinning him down. "Your sister's memory isn't a prison, Caleb. She's gone, and I'm still here trying to live." Mara grabbed the rifle, tossed it far into the flooded ditch. When Silas finally stood, chest heaving, Caleb lay exhausted, face streaked with rain and dirt. The fire in his eyes was gone. Only bitterness remained. "You'll never be welcome in that town again," Caleb spat. Silas turned to Mara, his voice steady. "Then we'll build our own." Caleb glared at her. "You think you can fix him? You'll leave just like the rest." Mara looked down at him, rain dripping from her chin. "I don't fix broken men, Mr. Ward," she said softly. "I walk beside them until they find their strength again." Caleb's lips parted, but no words came. He lowered his gaze. "You'll regret this life, Mara Quinn," she smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'll never regret loving a man brave enough to live again." Caleb turned and stumbled to his horse, riding off into the storm. Silas stood still for a long moment, the rain washing blood and mud from his face. Mara stepped closer, placing her hands against his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath soaked fabric. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but I thought I'd lost you." "You can't lose what's already yours," she whispered. He leaned down and kissed her, slow, desperate, rain mixing with tears. Around them, the world crashed and thundered, but inside that moment there was peace. When they pulled apart, Noah stood at the door, barefoot, clutching his blanket. "Mama," he whispered. Mara froze. She turned slowly. Silas's breath caught in his throat. The boy's voice was shaky but certain. "Mama," she walked to him, kneeling in the doorway. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Noah's eyes filled with tears. "Mama," he said again, and this time it was louder, steady, sure, like the first sunlight after a long storm. Mara's arms wrapped around him, her shoulders trembling. Silas knelt beside them both, pressing his forehead to hers. They stayed like that as the rain softened into silence, the storm breaking apart above them. Later, when the fire burned warm again and the smell of wet earth drifted through the open window, Mara sat by the hearth with Noah asleep in her lap. Silas watched her, the glow painting her face in gold. "Do you think he'll remember tonight?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "Not the fear, just the sound of rain, maybe the warmth. Maybe that's enough." He took her hand. "You know, the night you asked me if I sought a wife or your body, I thought I'd never be worthy of either. But you've given me more than I knew how to ask for." Mara looked up at him, her voice low. "You've given me something too." "What's that?" "A reason to stop running from my own reflection." He brushed his thumb across her knuckles. "Then we've both found home." The wind outside calmed. The lantern light flickered softly across the wooden walls. Tomorrow would bring whispers and judgment again. People always talked, but the ranch no longer felt like a place haunted by loss. It was alive, breathing, loved. Silas glanced toward the window, where dawn was beginning to push through the clouds. "You ever wonder," he said, "if we were meant to find each other?" Mara smiled, her eyes glowing in the light. "Maybe not meant to. Maybe we just refuse not to." He laughed quietly, pulling her close. Noah stirred, murmuring in his sleep. The fire cracked again, steady and sure. Outside, the land stretched endless and wild, the same land that had tested them, broken them, and now finally blessed them. For the first time in years, Silas Danner felt peace in his own heart. For the first time in her life, Mara Quinn felt seen, not as a giant, but as a woman whose love had tamed the loneliest corner of the West, and as dawn spilled gold across the fields. Their story became part of that land, proof that even in the harshest frontier, love could bloom like wild grass after rain, because sometimes the heart doesn't find home in comfort or perfection. It finds it in the storm.